November 16th, 2011, Gopal and Gayatri from the Shivananda Yoga Center in Wilmington, Delaware, talk about knowing Swami Vishnu-devananda. Hari Om Tat Sat.
Jaya Guru Shiva Guru Hari Guru Ram Jagat Guru Param Guru Sarguru Ram Jaya Guru Shiva Guru Hari Guru Ram Jagat Guru Param Guru Sarguru Ram Adi Guru Advaita Guru Ananda Guru
So to the TTC, I will pass you today and give you a diploma because you can chant.
Yeah, I know. Yeah.
And in Japan, they have to make it right. And so on a TTC, they really don't start chanting until about the 4th week. That's just how it is. And then that society does chant. Like their grandmothers chanted the Shinto priests. It's all about nature. And in Japan, if you meditate, that's how you find God. And that's with yoga. Swami Shivananda would tell you that. Meditate, meditate, meditate. He would meditate 12 to 13 hours that we know of. Swami Vishnu would meditate 5.5 to 6 hours, and then he would ask his mind, can we go another half an hour? There was a time he was in a car wreck. The first time he was in a car wreck, the car was actually on top of him. And he had an outer body experience in that he died. And so he said that he didn't want to come back. He didn't want to come back. He didn't want to. Master Shivananda said, well, you got to go back because you're not finished. But the last wreck that he had, he was in a car wreck. Somebody was driving him and he actually fell asleep. And the door flew open and he fell out. I mean, not fell, he was thrown out of the car. And his last accident, you would say he broke his back, his neck, and different things. And I think he had an outer body experience, like where he died, like 3 times on the operating table. And he, you know, Shivananda or God or somebody said, you got to come back. You're not finished yet. And it was really hard for him to sit after that. And I think he had his first 2 accidents, he was on his knee, his kneecap had hit. So that was, I knew him in the 80s. And of course he died in the 90s, so he's very fiery in the 80s. And as his life, he had learned all the lessons in life that he was going to have. And he was around Master Shivananda when he was 17 and a half. He went into the military when he was 16. He went in underage. He knew he had to leave home. And he went into the Navy. World War II was going on, so he wanted to join the Navy. Well, they flunked him on every test he had. And I kind of think they probably knew he was too young if I had to guess about it. The next day, within that week, he went into the Army recruiting station and they passed him with flying colors. And he said that Master Shivananda really made his whole life up to bring yoga to the West. And so in his schooling, he didn't like geography or sociology, but he, in science, all of his tests were 100. He was fascinated with it. He was in high school and he took human physiology and chemistry. Okay, now I had class with him here I got into this in 1980. And I had TTC. I came up here in 1981 and I saw everybody wearing yellow. I said, what the hell's that? And they just come out of the boutique and they were walking to the yoga hall in the summer for the 2 o'clock class. And they had their ice cream and sweets and everything. They still had their bags. They were still eating that stuff on the way up there. And I was raised a Catholic, in Catholic school and all that stuff. I thought they were going to be Swamis. I did, but there was a lot of them. There was like 40 of them. So what are you doing? We're going to class. And I think it was the second week, if I had to guess, and they knew the routine, they knew the drill, and they said, well, there's a TTC. You know, you learn how to teach yoga and everything. So I took it in 1982. 1984, I had ATTC with Swami Vishnu, and that was the only year that I know I've already taught everything. And I think in TTC, he missed a day because he had to go to the bank at 2 o'clock, the 2 o'clock lecture. He had to sign papers at the bank. And he told us, I can't be there because, then he said, we'll make it up tonight. And he would talk, oh my God, he would go on. He just, like forever. But it was like totally interested, and he says, I can talk about yoga for 6,000 years. But if you look at his life, he went into the military early. He went into the army. He met Shivananda in 17 and a half, and the first time they didn't really meet each other, he just saw him. And Shivananda's ashram, it's a long story, but there was only about 30, 35 people there when they started. And Master Shivananda was not that well known and everything, and actually he was in Swarg ashram and they didn't allow gurus there. And the man was a medical doctor. So he left Swarg ashram and he was in a cow shed, and people just wanted to take class with him and be around him and this and that. So the whole thing started, and I don't know if he wanted it or not, it's just karma, he just had to do it. And Swami Vishnu came there after the military, but the first time he saw Master Shivananda, he just looked at him. And he had tears in his eyes, and he cried, and he walked away. That was the end of it. And it was only a brief, just to see him. Then the next time he went there, the story was, well, if you go there, he hid to the right, and Master Shivananda always went to the left. And that day he went to the right where Swami Vishnu was hiding, and he bowed to him. And I think he was maybe 17 at the time, 17 and a half at the most. And Swami Vishnu came from a very well-to-do family, so that like blew him away. And then Swami Vishnu fell at his feet, and he, with all his love and all of his heart, that's what he was going to do. And Master Shivananda asked him if he stay here. Yes, Swamiji. Well, he gave his word, and he stayed there. And then he did say, you know, after his life unfolded, and he was into yoga and into Shivananda and into all this, that whether he liked it or not, his path was to actually bring yoga to the West. And when he got to the ashram, Master Shivananda told him, you're going to, 6 months there, he said, you're going to the West. Well, that didn't really make sense because that was a foreign country, and remember, he wasn't so good in geography and everything. And so when he come up here and he taught anatomy and physiology, like you're going to have that in your class, I knew a little bit, and I might have been 22, or I think I was 22 when I got up here, and the man knew everything. He knew the organs, he knew the glands, he knew this, he that. Like, he's the Swami. How did he learn all this? At the start, it was weird, and it wasn't a psychic thing. It's just he just knew everything. He knew insertions, origins, he knew all that stuff. And then come to find out, his whole life was he was totally fascinated with anatomy and physiology, and he learned it in high school, and he kept his life, he always learned it. That's what he was into. And my teacher was Bharat. He had 20 patents. His last patent, that stretchy stuff that you wear, that was his patent. So that spandex came from this ashram. He questioned Shivananda. He said, if you are who you say you are, I need help. He was a research scientist or an engineer, or however. He said, I need help on this project. So nothing happened for about 2 or 3 hours. Then he got a message. Go down and look at this. Go to the library, pick this book out, this and that. Anyway, it was all said and done that evening. He had 4 patents. His last patent was spandex. And he told me that every 2 years he would put out one of those inventions, and it was a patent. So he really didn't have to work. He could just close his door and do yoga. That's yoga stuff, yoga books, read, this and that. And every 2 years he would put out another invention, and it was a patent. And he did tell me somewhere along the way, Bharat, we just lost him this year, he's about 80. He had a yoga center for 38 years in the same place. He was married with 2 kids, and he taught 3 times a week. His totally connected to Master Shivananda, totally connected to Swami Vishnu. There's times where he had his yoga class, and we were at a university, and I learned yoga at a university with him. He'd be sitting in meditation, and the thing was about an hour and 45 minutes, and he would talk about reincarnation and karma and vegetarian, and of course he was Indian. I disagree with everything the man said. I was raised Catholic, like this and that. So he was very open-minded, so just come back, come back, come back. So he kept going, and it was karma for me to be there. And he said, with his fibers and fabric, and he thought there was about 7 people in the world he could talk to. And as his life unfolded, he actually wrote a book about 35, 38 years in the fiber industry. So the man, everything he knew, he put all the secrets in a book and gave that to the world. And he wrote, I'm guessing like 6 or 7 books. Some of them are 400 pages long. And everything from the 60s and 70s, and he just kept it, and he wrote it all down. So that's pretty wild. But in his class, there were sightings of, he would be sitting there and doing the thing, and then the next, after the class, a college kid would come up to him and say, who was sitting in your place? He said, well, did he have long blonde hair? No, he was bald, and one woman said he had an orange tablecloth. That was Swami Shivananda. And actually, when his wife died, there's people that are connected to that yoga center, connected to her, connected to him. It's all same. She appeared to them after she died in full form, and they both sat down on the bed and said, don't worry about anything, it's all right. That's pretty wild. And we had the reunion. We had people that came up here this summer. One of the women was, so I wish you just go out and teach anything, anywhere. And I would come up here, and I was in the military. I was a paratrooper in the infantry in the United States, and I got out of that, and I got into yoga, and I would just I just stand at attention and talk to him. I'm doing this, I'm doing that, I'm doing this, doing that. And, you know, he was in the military, so I guess we got along. But he never yelled at me, and I never, like, if he said, do something, I did it. And I wanted to do it. And you do the Gajananam and all that. He'd say, what's that mean? Or you'd take a chance at, what's that mean? He said, just don't sing it to sing it. You got to know why you're doing it. And in the 80s, everybody had a guru. And when, to come up here, he did not want blind followers. And he was very direct, and he didn't like hypocrisy. He didn't like to bow to a religious person. No way. And he was a very well-to-do person. His family was very rich, and they had land and everything, and they had servants. And the first job that he got at the ashram, he said the clothes were up to his neck. It was all the laundry from the weekend, and Master Shivananda asked him to go down to the river and clean it. And this is from a person that had servants. He thought he would go to Rishikesh and somebody would just tap him on the forehead and he would know everything. What happened in past lives, he did a lot of hatha yoga, and he really, for me, he didn't like organizations, but he was in charge of a worldwide organization. But to sit under one of these trees out here, and he'd just talk to you like a person. He'd talk to like maybe 20 people. That's what he liked. But he had to manage everything, and good, bad, or indifferent, it was his. And it was his karma. And if one of you went to take some time off and go paint a picture or go do the calligraphy for the diplomas, where is she? Well, she's helping us paint. It's her karma to be here and take this TTC. Go get her. Don't ever do that again. And then he turns it around and he says to the staff or to the Swamis, there's a bunch of them, he said, you guys got me messed up. I'm here to teach this person and she's not here. So he flips it around both ways, like she's paying to take the course here. She's not here. It's my karma to teach this person. She's not here. He would pay an air flight. Somebody was in my class, I think it was TTC, and she was from Eastern Europe. He paid her ticket, her TTC. She came and took it, TTC. And she had to do an extra hour of karma. And that's just who he was. He would pay the airline ticket just to get you over here. And Eastern Europe was not developed, and I remember Spain was under Franco, and then in the 80s they were free. All kinds of Spanish people came here. They went to everything everywhere, and they came here, and they loved it, and they were the nicest people you could find. So the story goes, they cooked in the kitchen, a bunch of them. And they came over here, he probably paid their way, I don't know. They went on strike. They went on strike. Okay, we don't have any food for the morning. The Swamis were giving out boxes of little cereal and apples. Really sorry. That's probably the worst meal I ever had here. They had to sit down with the Spanish cooks and figure out why they were angry and get that sorted out. And that night they were cooking. So Swami Vishnu took people from all over the world, a big melting pot, and it was Unity University, and it's still that way today. And the Japanese people went to Thailand to have their TTC. It still goes on, and they didn't know what they were going to do after Swami Vishnu died, and there's trained, what, 28,000 people or something? So, show goes on either way. And so now Gayatri can have you. She's from Delaware. She's from the same place, and I think she was in my class in Delaware back in 86 or something?
81.
Yeah, and Swami Vishnu told her when Swami Vishnu came to Wilmington, to Delaware, you told her you need to come to Canada and learn yoga. And that's who now you can have her.
Thank you, Gopal. Namo Bhagavate Shivanandaya, Om Namo Bhagavate Vishnu-devananda. It's my privilege to be here and to be able to share with you a little bit tonight. We can talk for days and days and days because we have this enormous love for our gurus, and our gurus gave us so much that it's possible to just, once we get talking, we don't want to stop, really, because we connect with that love. So, in terms of Swami Vishnu, it's not possible, really, to talk about him without talking about Swami Shivananda. Swami Vishnu's life, he said, the story that Gopal started to tell was when he went to the army. He went the first time and they said, no, you can't go. And then he still wanted to go. He was leaving his home, and he was on a train, and mysteriously someone showed up and said that they were going to go enlist. And did Swami Vishnu want to go with him? And Swamiji said yes, and that person got him to the army. Swamiji enlisted, and then that person left, disappeared. He never saw him again. And from that point, Swamiji said that a force was operating in his life. And shortly after that, that's when he met Master Shivananda. He talked about when he was young, he said, my whole life was based on discipline. And from a very early age, from about 4 years old, he would have to walk very far to school. He did everything early. He went to school early, he graduated early, he got into the army early, he was very young in the ashram, he was initiated as a monk. I think he was very young. And when he used to go to school, they had a system, because it was far. I think he said it was about 3 miles or so.
3 miles.
And he was only 4 years old. So and he was in a small village. So to go to the school, it wasn't like regular roads and sidewalks and everything that we have now. So the older children would help the younger children get to school, and then that's how they had that system. But he did talk about, I remember him talking about this one time, just in conversation, how his life was based on discipline. And I met him in 1985. Gopal was my first yoga teacher. He was trained by Swami Vishnu. Then Swami Vishnu-devananda came to Delaware, where we had a yoga center that Bharat was running. And at that time, he had had the car accident and had pain in the knees, but he was fine, walking and talking. He talked very, very fast. And when he would talk about something, he didn't just say it one way, like I'm saying it one way, and I'm hoping you're understanding what I'm saying. He would approach a subject from 5 different angles. So if you didn't get it one way, you got it the other way. If you didn't get it the second way, you got it the third way. He had a way of really wrapping a subject so that you understood what it was about. And he was a very strict disciplinarian. You were not late for satsang. He loved satsang, by the way. If you were late, he would stop and point and say, why are you late? And you had to go from wherever you were there and come to the platform and explain to him why you were late. You did not leave the satsang until the satsang was over. That didn't mean it ended at 9 o'clock. Didn't mean it ended at 9:30. It meant it ended when he was done telling us what he needed to tell us. In meditation, a lot of it was, I felt, learning how to sit still. Learning how he would always talk about the silence, going into the silence. In many ways, I think Swamiji was a paradox, because he was very strict in terms of discipline and very loving at the same time. Incredible joy. You would feel immense joy with him. He could go deep, deep, deep within, and he could be extremely extroverted. If you came here, he would want to know, what's your name and where are you from? It was very important to him to treat guests. There's an Indian expression, you treat the guests as God. He taught us that. It was very, very important to him that we worked hard. He did not like people to be lazy. He did not like, I started saying about the satsang, like you really couldn't cough. If you had to cough, you had to find a way to suppress it. You couldn't disturb the meditation. You couldn't get up. You wouldn't, if you had to blow your nose, you wouldn't blow your nose. You would be silent for that half hour. You would not take your leg and stick it in front of you. You would not move. He wanted you to be still, the back straight for that full half hour. And that was a real discipline. And when you were training with him, even if it was 8 hours of sitting, you sat. You didn't wiggle. I remember that, like if you were slumped, he found you. He said, sit up, don't slump your back. So when I was going to tell you a story, I was going somewhere.
Disciplinary, loving.
Yeah, it was very loving, very disciplined. I don't know.
You met him at the center, his knees were gone.
Yeah. I'll find it later. But anyway, he also would incorporate whatever was happening at the time, the current events, into the satsang. So it was always very current and very alive. He was in many ways unpredictable. Things were not rote at all. You really didn't know which direction he would go at a particular time. So I was with him for those early years, and then at the end of his life, I was also with him. He had had a stroke, so his one side of the body was paralyzed. So some people had to help him. That's what it seemed like, we were helping him, but really it felt more like we were getting the help. And he would like to go on pilgrimages a lot, about the last 3 or 4 years of his life. He had an adamantine will. If he put his mind to something, it was followed through until it was finished. And Gopal talked about the car accident. He had cracked, in this last car accident, he had cracked the vertebrae in his neck. And he would wear this neck brace. And we would go on pilgrimage at least every day, in the snow, in the rain, in the sun, whatever the weather was. And when Swamiji wanted to build the Subramanya temple, we would go with the wheelchair up to the top of the mountain, and he would meditate there before he started the temple. We would do this very, very often. So if you haven't been here in the winter, the snows can be waist deep. So we would take him in the wheelchair, and there was no steps. So what I'm referring to is, if you haven't been there, there's a mountain here, those steps that go up. However, there were no steps, so we would take the wheelchair. His neck was broken, and he had to tilt back on the wheelchair so that we could pull him up the mountain. Would try to hold his neck, tried to pull him up the mountain and bring him to this spot that he needed to go to meditate, to bring the Subramanya temple. If you want to have some idea experientially of what that could be like, don't take the stairs up to the Subramanya temple and walk through the forest. Now, imagine that the snow is to your waist, and imagine you're carrying a wheelchair kicked back on 2 wheels and trying to protect Swamiji's neck, going all the way up, meditating in the cold, and coming back down. This is one example of many of the kind of will he had. Enormous will. He was fearless. That's another quality he had, and that I was very lucky to witness. One example of that is we were in India, and I believe it was in Varanasi, and we were taking a boat. And this boat was huge. The deck was probably where this wooden border is. And to get onto that deck was a wooden plank, like this. So it was angled like this, from there all the way to here. It was like a full floor high. Below that was the water, that's all. I was very afraid. I was like, I'm not going on that plank. That's the only way to get on this boat. I was really afraid. Now, the next thing you know, get Swamiji's in the wheelchair, hold the wheelchair from the back, 2 people, hold the wheelchair from the front, and carry Swamiji up this plank on the wheelchair. Well, I got very ashamed at that point. I said, oh my, why? Swamiji's doing like this. If he fell, he just would have, he was paralyzed. You have to remember, the body didn't work. It's not like he could have put his hands down or put his legs down. So he was absolutely fearless. One other memory I was talking about, he would use what was ever current in the satsang, and today we went on that very lovely walk in the morning. And I was remembering we did what's called a Ganga Paligrama. It's a pilgrimage from the source of the Ganga to the end of the Ganga, which ends in the ocean actually. So to get there, from Delhi we took a bus to Swamiji's cave in Gangotri. That in and of itself is an experience, but at least we were in a bus, right? So if you, as you're driving, it's a sheer drop down, and sometimes, remember this? Sometimes there would be a guardrail, like from here, maybe like this high. So if the bus went off, it went off. And I am talking about a spot, the whole time you're sort of angled like that because you keep going around the mountain and around the mountain. And you're doing that probably 8 hours or so. So then we get to Swamiji's cave, and he's in the wheelchair, and he wanted to go to Gomo, which is the mouth of the Ganges. Now what happens is, there's no more road per se. It's a path that is no bigger than the width of this mat. The terrain, it was like a white shards. It almost was like shells or rocks. And as we're going, we're getting to about 10 to 12,000 feet. So the air is very thin. Swamiji's on the wheelchair. We had to carry him and pull him all the way up to the source of the Ganges. And at some point, the road really didn't even work. So then we couldn't continue pulling the wheelchair, so they had to get a palanquin. So they had Sherpas to carry Swamiji in the palanquin. And again, if anything had happened, the other point is, so here's the path down, I think was hundreds of feet to the water, and up is just a sheer mountain. And if anything had happened to Swamiji, because now he's not even on the path anymore, he's about 5 feet up on the shoulders of everyone, and absolutely made it to Gomo, absolutely made it back. But this was, if he said something was going to happen, no matter what it was, if he said, you're going to build a pond in front of my house, and we say, Swamiji, you're not allowed, it's against the rules here, there's no water here, that's not good. Well, do you see a pond there? I do. Whatever he said was going to happen, he had it in his mind, and that's exactly what happened. The other thing I just want to say, I know it's time to stop. It doesn't matter whether you met Swamiji in the body or not. Swami Vishnu has this enormous love for his master, Swami Shivananda. Swami Vishnu imparted that to us, so we feel that we also know Master. We never met Master in the body, yet all of us are connected to Master. What did Master say? Look at Master's book. Hear Master's lecture. What's Master singing? With Swamiji, similarly, you didn't have to meet him in the body to feel connected to him. You can, because he wasn't limited to the body. He was in a body for a period of time, but he's not the body. And that energy, I don't really know how to say the right words, but you can tune to Swamiji. It has everything to do with your heart and your intention. It's tuned to Swamiji, it's tuned to Master Shivananda. It's very lovely. This picture here is of Swamiji's mother. She became a Swami herself. So he also was very devoted to Divine Mother. Swamiji was very devoted to the Divine Mother. I want to say one other thing. So when we would travel, we didn't know day and night. We really weren't on a schedule at all when we would travel. Whenever we would be in the van, we had a van that was constructed so that this is Swamiji's stretcher. So underneath the stretcher, there were these locks in the van. So he could take the stretcher, put it in the van and lock it in, and then travel, and he could be at least lying down. So whenever we would be in the van, it was not quiet. We did not talk to each other, chit-chat. Swami Vishnu, I didn't chit-chat. He said, he spoke a lot, but it was always relevant and always pertinent to spiritual teachings and spirituality. And we would chant Om Namo Narayanaya constantly, hours and hours and hours and hours and hours. He always either had Devi Mahatmyam playing or Om Namo Narayanaya. Usually these two things were always in the background with him, and he always asked us to chant Om Namo Narayanaya. So can we do a few? Om Namo Narayanaya.
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 Om Namo
Narayanaya. Om Namo Narayanaya. Om Namo Narayanaya. Om Namo Narayanaya. Om Namo Narayanaya. Om Namo Narayanaya. Om Namo Narayanaya. Om Namo Narayanaya. Om Namo Narayanaya. Om Narayanaya.
Okay? She's always around, and also Gopal is with us till I don't know when. So we'll finish with the final prayers and arati.